At first, I was afraid. I was petrified. Kept thinking I could never live without you by my side. But then I spent so many nights just thinking how you done me wrong. I grew strong.
Three, two, one.
Now, if you'll excuse me. Huh, kids?
I'm not going to lie, I prefer the Squatchaholics. Hey, Mustache Carousel. I got no camera. I got no nothing. It says you're not actually there, but it says you're there. So there's not much I can do with that. How are we doing tonight, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back. Was it that an interesting week? Try again, Sasquatchians. Look, I kind of like Squatchaholics. That actually kind of works. Although it sounds like I'm a drug, I'm not sure I approve of that type of behavior. But I mean, it could be worse, right? Maybe I'm not addictive. Who knows? I mean, I'm not permitted to start a cult, so you've got that going for you. That's right. Back out, try again there, big dog. It'll work. You just got to kick it in the sides right. All right. Who in chat is familiar with Spring Hill Jack? So I got looking around to see who had done videos on Spring Hill Jack, because there's a few out there. There's a couple of smaller creators that did some pretty decent ones, but Bob Gimlin went and did a mid 19th century steampunk era type who's who of London freaks. I don't know what to call them. Like Spring Hill Jack, there's the, what is it, the Maudlin Madam or whatever. She's the really dusty white woman, old woman that stands on the bridge. There's a few of them, and this video specifically covers the Hammersmith Ghost and the story of Spring Hill Jack, and he kind of mentions a few other peoples of that time period, like some really weird reports. Like people used to go to the London Metropolis and report all kinds of stuff, whether they got liquored up or they got some bad, haggis or whatever it was that caused them to see this stuff. They'd go in and report the weirdest things, and the English being the English, they wrote that stuff down. They didn't really put a whole lot of stock into it most of the time, but they did write it down. Canic Chase? Who's Canic Chase? I don't get it. We're supposed to have Untethered Live here, but he seems to be having some disagreements with his equipment. So I was trying to give him a few minutes to show up. Am I too tiny? I don't crush your head. Right. What's up, John Denicola? Good to see you, bud. Let's do that thing. We'll do the whole thing. We'll do it just like we're supposed to do it. ATL gets the gold. Yep. ATL Transparency News. Amanda HBJ gets the silver. And Cole Creek Croft gets the bronze. Welcome in. John Delacolo's in chat. We've got a Veterans Affairs official, which is cool. I'm assuming that's a Veterans Affairs and not some troll account. You want to scratch my beard? I think it might be a troll account. I just don't see him swinging that way, right? Everybody saying hi. M's Mad World's in chat. It's good to see you, bud. Welcome in. Fab Daddy 44. Good to see you, brother. And Dennis Bowles. What is up, my brother? What I didn't do anything to Jake. He popped in backstage, and then he popped up his 2 windows. Then he popped up his 3 windows, and none of the windows had anyone in them. There was no one there. And then they all went away. And then one window came back, and it didn't have anybody in it. And until I have, some kind of visual, something. I mean, show me something, man. Like, give me something to work with. Old guy Mitch, good to see you, bud. Welcome in. Are you leaving? Don't leave yet. We just getting started. I ain't even got warmed up yet. I'm gonna be talking trash about this dude all night. All right, so imagine you wake up one night to somebody ringing your doorbell. And you step up to the doorbell, and standing outside is this guy wearing what appears to be, I mean, by writ description, a Darth Vader outfit. And at the moment you open the door, he flashes this bright flash of light, breathes fire out of his mouth, and hits you with a halibut. And then he screams something unintelligible and jumps onto a 4th floor balcony, where he then leaps onto a roof and runs away. So, how would you report that event having taken place? Would you mention the halibut? Would that be an important feature? I mean, I don't know. Country Boy Archaeology, welcome in. Good to see you. I'm not sure I would have brought the halibut up. I'm not sure he mentions the halibut, but there was at least one individual assaulted with a fish by Spring Hill Jack. And I don't remember where I read it, but I have read it. I swear it, because it's the story that I know Spring Hill Jack by, was the chick being assaulted with the fish. It was a couple of blocks from a fishmonger, so it wasn't uncommon for people to be assaulted with fish on that block. Unfortunately, people be peoples. But this is Bob Gimlin. If you like stories, he's a pretty good narrator. He's got a haunted computer over there that he's using to make content, and hopefully this October it'll really pay off for him. I really dig the dude.
I'm Bob Gimlin.
Bob.
This video is about a rash of bizarre humanoid type encounters that took place in London.
All right, this is one thing that I want to be specific about. He does not account all of these as the same individual. He accounts them as different accounts of different reports of different individuals having different experiences, which I get it. But if you have more than 3 people running around with mechanical jumping shoes, you have a superhero problem or a supervillain problem. And in the chat, you can decide which one.
In the 19th century, I think the term humanoid cryptid is reasonable, as the subjects are human-like enough to pass as human at a glance, but by capabilities and further description must be classified as something else entirely, or at least from somewhere else entirely. Perhaps the most legendary of the humanoid cryptids is, of course, Spring-Heeled Jack. It was January of 1826, Victorian England, when the Northampton Mercury reported that a shopkeeper saw a man in a cloak and a mask vault over a 10-foot wall. It was the shopkeeper's impression that the man...
I guess it might be worthwhile to point out, it is most likely that these incidents were possibly not all different people, but probably not the same individual in every case. I mean, People do drink, people do drugs, people do, and that's what they do. You know how that goes. So, how reliable is an eyewitness account anyway? Is this a particular debate in the justice community? Don't we have to wonder about that? I mean, quite often we trust cops just to tell people what happened. The judge just looks at him and goes, "Okay, guilty."
Man's cloak was concealing some strange attire. The shopkeeper was certain that some kind of mechanization assisted the cloaked man in moving the way he did, and even went as far as to speculate that the man must have.
Have you seen the folks with the stilts that do the roofs, the ceilings? They run around on stilts doing ceilings and drywall and stuff. Could you imagine having come across one of those folks in medieval London? Not medieval, but Victorian London. I imagine that would have caused some jaw dropping. I guess they had folks on stilts back then too. They didn't have any giant Uncle Sams.
Wore, quote, spring boots that enable him to vault. The police said they couldn't find any other witnesses, but that they intend to take the matter seriously due to the shopkeeper's sincerity, confusion, and lack of motive or gain to lie. This 1826 report is before the alleged entity was named Spring-Heeled Jack. And then there is an absence of anything on the matter until 1837, 11 years after the first newspaper article. Some well-to-doers were on a stroll through a park near Kensington Palace when they said they saw a cloaked man with some kind of helmet springing through the walled park. This was January of 1837.
Springing. I'm assuming boink, kaboink, 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 like Pepe Le Pew after his one and only love.
And as the year progressed, a number of young women were accosted by this cloaked man in a headpiece. These, quote, outrages, as they would later be called, were not covered in any newspapers. They would join.
Right. No, a lot of these were merely written down by the police department and logged next to other weird shit that happened in London on that day. Like, so this chick got attacked by with a halibut. Halibut? Yes, a halibut. They couldn't spring for the salmon. I don't know.
Joined the lore precisely 1 year later, in January 1838. Apparently, someone was upset that the issue wasn't given enough attention by authorities. Someone who identified themselves only as a resident of Peckham sent a letter to the Lord Mayor of London, Sir John Cowan. Cowan read the letter to the press at the Lord Mayor's mansion. Quote, "To the Right Honourable the Lord Mayor. My Lord, the writer presumes that your lordship will kindly overlook the liberty he has taken in addressing a few lines on a subject which, within the last few weeks, has caused much alarming sensation in the neighbouring villages within 3 or 4 miles of London. It appears that some individuals, as of the writer believes, the higher ranks of life, have laid a wager with a mischievous and foolhardy companion, name as yet unknown, that he durst not take upon himself the task of visiting many of the villages near London in the 3 different disguises of a ghost."
Well, there's no mention of a pole whatsoever. There are mention of his glowing red eyes and him breathing blue flame, but no mention of a pole. You figure that might be something they might have noticed if he was vaulting 12 feet with a pole. It might have been like he jumped up there with his mechanical boots and he carried this 12-foot long pole. They might have said something about it, I guess.
Ghost, a bear, and a devil. And moreover, he will not dare to enter gentlemen's gardens for the purpose of alarming the inmates of the house. The wager has, however, been accepted, and the unmanly villain has succeeded in depriving 7 ladies of their senses. At one house he rang the bell, and on the servant coming to open the door, this worse than brute stood in no less dreadful figure than a spectre, clad most perfectly. The consequence was that the poor girl immediately swooned, and has never from that moment been in her senses.
Hey,
but on
Jeff,
seeing
welcome
any
in.
man scream,
How are you doing this evening? Are things well? Are you doing okay? Are you bored? Check this out. This is Spring-Heeled Jack. Bob Gimlin did a whole thing on it. If you're bored,
screams out most violently, "Take him away." There are 2 ladies, which your lordship will regret to hear, who have husbands and children, and who are not expected to recover, but likely to become burdens upon their families. For fear that your lordship might imagine that the writer exaggerates, he will refrain from mentioning other cases, if anything, more melancholy than those he has already related.
I know what it is. They saw a lineman, an early lineman. This was during the era of like gas lights but some electric lights were being installed in London this early. They came across a lineman at night and it scared the living shit out of him. She screamed, he flinched, contacted something, and probably died right there while she ran away.
The affair has now been going on for some time, and stranger to say, the papers are still silent on the subject. The writer is very unwilling to be unjust towards any man, but he has reason to believe that they have the whole history at their fingers' end. But through interested
It was pretty spiffy, I guess. Just got done with a 7-day ban because, you know, I've got a really sick sense of humor and I did a naughty thing. And I was thinking about doing a big, long apology video to YouTube, set up very much like a campaign ad. You know, some sappy music in the background, pretend that I'm filling up my truck at a hay bale or something. One of those electric car places, just pull up, like pretend like I'm sticking it in the gas tank while I turn and talk soulfully to the camera. You know, I do apologize for my horrible sense of humor. It is quite dark and maudlin. You know, that kind of stuff. Well, I mean, I figure it's heading into election season. Election humor is going to at least get to be a little bit of a thing to do occasionally. And if you can do it, you know, without poking any fun at any particular party in any particular direction. What's up, Hawk fan? Welcome back. Good to see you, bud.
motives are induced to remain silent. It is, however, high time that such a detestable nuisance should be put a stop to, and the writer feels assured that your lordship, as the chief magistrate of London, will take great pleasure in exerting your power to bring the villain to justice. Hoping your lordship will pardon the liberty I have taken in writing, I remain your lordship's most humble servant, a resident of Peckham. I watched a few videos on Spring-Heeled Jack, and all of them said that the Lord Mayor read the letter as something of a joke. And a couple...
It's good to see you too, brother. I know I've been kind of doing other stuff recently, but I'm trying to get into the whole groove of things, let things kind of flow organically, so to speak. Try not to rush nothing. Things get so jumbled when we get rushed.
A couple of the videos even went as far as to say that the Lord Mayor was exercising the predominant patriarchal something. And frankly,
his name's Jeff. What's up, Jeff? What's happening, brother? I appreciate you hitting that like button. You know, you could throw one of them share buttons on that thing if you wanted to. It wouldn't hurt my feelings one damn diddly bit, let me tell you. I even got a little thing, thumbnail that I made about Sasquatch chasing clout. You know, but it's what we do. We're YouTubers, right? And that's how it works.
assumed that was indeed the case, but then I read a few newspaper reports on the Lord Mayor's speech, and I don't know. It didn't seem like a joke to me. It seemed like it was taken seriously. According to the Morning Chronicle, January 9th, 1838, the Lord Mayor said that, quote, as our friends on the other side of the Atlantic are in the habit of saying, it was extraordinary if true, and if indeed a trick is being practiced by fools, he was confident that police vigilance could prevent further annoyance. He said that he could regrettably not act upon the, quote, dreadful vision because it had yet to enter his jurisdiction in London. He even went as far as to say that this letter was not the first he'd heard of on the matter.
All right, so as I understand it, homie would show up in more or less deserted gardens. Hello, Orb Puff. Welcome in. Good to see you. He would go to the back bell or to the servant's entrance bell, and he would ring the bell at the servant's entrance or the delivery entrance door. And when whoever it was answered the door, he would assault them with some unsightly features and then spring away to safety, leaving the person there just kind of screaming and yelling and generally insensible. Apparently, several of these women went, to quote the nomenclature of the day, insensible for the rest of their lives. This guy was so scary that one glance of him would leave a woman in a fainted state or a coma, depending on how you want to say it.
And that he was aware of several girls and a blacksmith who had terrifying encounters in the region described. And it was the Lord Mayor's opinion that, though the writer of the letter referred to himself as male, the penmanship...
No, I can't do it. I got a ooh-woo from you, Orb Puff. I got it recorded. You dude it once. I heard you do it. What's up, Joe King? Welcome in, bud. Good to see you. It was right there for them. I appreciate it. The whole sharing things is a superpower on YouTube. It's kind of one of those things that everybody can do, but almost nobody ever does it. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. I gotta give it to you. Bam. Because I love you. I don't generally do that kind of stuff on my show, because
was, quote, the beautiful hand of a woman. He thought the letter was written by either a victim or someone close to a victim. And finally, the Lord Mayor invited the anonymous resident of Peckham to circumvent press and police and reach out to him for a direct description of the, quote, devil. All I mean to say is that nothing I could find on the matter indicates that the Lord...
Oh, to be clear, to be absolutely clear, it was an absolutely well-deserved strike. I didn't really mean to upload it. It was an accident. I was trying to clip it to send it to somebody on my messenger, and somehow it ended up on the upload screen, and I got distracted. I set my phone down. When I came back, there was a short already ready to upload and everything, and I just sent it. I just sent it. I don't know what to tell you. I have no excuse. I'm not saying it was right. I'm saying that it was not an educated, well thought out, or considered decision. It was just something that occurred, and it has happened, and it's well deserved. You shouldn't post things like that on YouTube, apparently. But at least it's not a situation where somebody got 1 million views, got their first video over 150,000 views, hit 3,000 subscribers, and qualified for monetization, and I caught a strike all in the same 48-hour period. That's not the kind of thing that might happen to a body, is it? I mean, I'm sure there's no sort of conspiracy type activity of collusion going on backstage somewhere to conspire against people becoming monetized. I don't think that's what's happening at all. Did I ever tell you I believe in ghosts?
The mayor was joking or mocking, and maybe he was, and I'm missing something. But his response seems pretty legit to me. Boilerplate. He read the letter to show he wasn't hiding or suppressing it. He confirmed that he had independently heard tell of corroborating reports. He expressed his confidence in the police's ability to protect the public, and then he welcomed the writer to come forward with a further description in hopes of identifying the culprit. So I don't know. It seems to me like it was taken seriously. Maybe his response was in a mocking tone, but that's not my perception. But again, maybe I'm missing something. I often am. I just want to wrap up the matter of the letter by saying what the subject was referred to. The letter's author called the entity, quote, an alarming sensation, someone in the disguise of a ghost, bear, or devil, an unmanly villain, a specter clad most perfectly, and a detestable nuisance. And then the mayor referred to it as a ghost, a devil, a terrible vision, a bugaboo, an assailant, and a demon. Again, I very well may be missing something, but to me, it seems like he took the report seriously. Anyway, the anonymous letter was sent to Lord Mayor Cowan in January of 1838. The next occurrence takes place a month later, in February of that year, and this one was covered by newspapers. Likely because Cowan addressed the issue, and therefore it was now considered decent enough to cover. Jane Alsop was an 18-year-old girl who resided in Newford, in the London borough of Tower Hamlets. The urbanized district housed factory and railway workers in the ever-industrializing region. According to the Times of London, February 22nd, 1838, Jane went to the front door when she heard what she would later describe as, quote, violent ringing of bells. From her doorway, she was greeted by a cloaked man in the streets. Aggressively, he said to her, quote, for God's sake, bring me a light, for we have caught Spring-Heel Jack here in the lane. Apparently assuming he was a detective, she fetched a candle, and then, quote, the instant she had done so, he threw off his outer garment, a large cloak, and applying the lighted candle to his breast, and presented a most hideous and frightful appearance, and vomited forth a quantity of blue and white flame from his mouth, and his eyes resembled red balls of fire. From the hasty glance which her fright enabled her to get at his person, she observed that he wore a large helmet, and his dress, which appeared to fit him very tight, seemed to her to resemble white oilskin. Without uttering a sentence, he darted at her, and catching her partly by her dress and the back part of her neck, placed her head under one of his arms, and commenced tearing her dress with his claws. which she was certain were made of some metallic substance, and by considerable exertion got away from him and ran towards the house to get in. Her assailant, however, followed her and caught her on the steps leading to the hall door, when he again used considerable violence, tore her neck and arms with his claws, as well as a quantity of hair from her head. But she was at length rescued from his grasp by one of her sisters. Miss Alsop added that she had suffered considerably all night from the shock she had sustained, and was then in extreme pain, both from the injury done to her arm and the wounds and scratches inflicted by the miscreant about her shoulders and neck with his claws or hands. A man named Thomas Milbank was interrogated by police immediately after the incident. They suspected he was Spring-Heeled Jack, because at the pub he frequently claimed to be Spring-Heeled Jack. However, upon a lineup, Jane was certain that Milbank was not the man.
Abs and observation, so do I. Every time I get liquored up on tequila, I tell everybody I'm Spring-Heeled Jack. Don't make it necessarily so.
And who had assaulted her. And the police were inclined to agree with her. Police said he wasn't physically capable of doing any springing of any kind, nor did he possess the mental acuity to wield alleged devices. Only days after Alsop's encounter, another outrage was levied by Spring-Heeled Jack. Two sisters with the last name Scales saw what they at first thought to be a man of, quote, tall, thin, and gentlemanly appearance. This is according to the annual register. They said that at first, they thought he was carrying a lamp in front of him, which was odd because it was during daylight, or whatever they call daylight in London. It seems he abruptly made for them, at which point they noticed that his hands were free, and he was wearing what were described as iron claws at the end of strange gloves, and the oil lamp was actually attached to his chest. The women were obviously aghast by this. I would be too, when the man...
All right, correct me if I'm wrong. That's not unlike the description of a mudlark from the sewers, right? Wouldn't they be wearing a set of goggles, a hat to keep crap from falling on their head, maybe a cloak to keep the shit off their shoulders? You're Jack of the Beanstalk. I hear you, baby. Fee, fi, fo, fum. That's right. I'm just trying to figure out a something from the time period that might actually fit the bill of a fire breathing spookum. I don't know. Doesn't make sense. And apparently Jake is not going to be able to join us for some reason. He's having some serious StreamYard issues. Which is weird because everything seems to be working. And he pops up backstage. I'll add you up. Can I hear you? Yeah, it's not giving me nothing. There you are.
I made it. Jesus Christ.
Probably not.
I think somebody has it out for me.
I don't blame them. You're kind of annoying.
Hey, be nice. The mustache cometh.
I see the mustache cometh. How are they going to know who you are?
They know who I am.
Everyone knows who you are? Or are we supposed to be in your head listening to the voices?
Is anybody here yet?
Yeah, we got 15 people over here. Chilling like
Hey, 15 people. Good to see you. Sorry I'm late. It's Untethered Live.
There you go.
Let me fix it for you.
If you showed up on time, I was going to give you a little intro thing. You'd have been able to have the whole shindig.
Well, I'm sorry. I tried. I was here at 8 o'clock. I hit the button and dead. I couldn't do anything. I restarted my phone. I went to Verizon app. Nothing. And then all of a sudden, 25 minutes later, it started working again. I don't know what the hell happened.
You got one of them hard updates, bud.
Something happened. Let me see if I can
Which are you up to date on where we're at, what we was doing, or have you been beating up your phone the whole time?
I've been beating up my phone the whole time.
Right? Okay. So Spring-Heeled Jack. I told you about Spring-Heeled Jack before, right?
I know about Spring-Heeled Jack.
right? He accosted people with halibuts.
He also had springs in his feet and wore a cape and was like the medieval Batman, only he killed people.
Did
And
he kill
lasted
people?
for about 150 years, so clearly there was more than one of them.
Well, we've got a video over here that's going over not just the references to Spring Hill Jack, but also the other references in the time period of other strange figures that were witnessed in the area.
Spring Hill Jack is kind of the predecessor to Jack the Ripper.
They're right there in the same ballpark and time period, although I don't know that Spring Hill Jack killed anyone. I couldn't find reference of him. He scared people insensible into comas that lasted the rest of their life.
I think he was just a menace to society. I don't know much about him, but I know I'm familiar with the character. But I think he was just like a, boogie, woogie, woogie, woogie kind of guy.
He was like the first troll, but he was like a meta troll. He did it physically. He showed up, literally hit you with a fish. What's up, Janica?
Yes.
Good to see you. I mean, can you imagine the amount of balls it takes to show up and like smack the governor's servant with a sardine can? some freaking salmon oil.
I want to know what they're feeding people over in England, because you got Guy Fawkes, you've got Spring Hill Jack, you've got Jack the Ripper, you've got 4 or 5 other characters that are random and just show up and start messing with people.
Well, that could be explained by the fact that the Metropolitan Police pretty much write down everything, like everything. And after 100 years, all the normal shit just gets filtered out, and the only thing that's left is weird. Like the guy who died because of canaries up the hoo-ha. Apparently he was a chick. He lived his whole life. I can't remember the dude's name, but he actually filled out all the paperwork and everything to be like a chimney sweep as a man. Went through her whole life as a man. And when she died, it was discovered she was a she, not a he, and that apparently the reason she died is she had a canary in her hoo-ha. I don't know why or any. We might have to dig that case up. That sounds like a whole show.
In some kind
Somebody's
of leaned forward at one of the sisters, Lucy's scales. Then the miscreant, quote, spurted a quantity of blue flame right in her face, at which point Lucy collapsed in a violent fit. The sisters had just left their brother's house, and their brother was still on the porch after seeing them off. He heard both his sisters scream, and he ran to their aid. He only saw what he described as a cloaked man disappearing around a corner. He was adamant that the only reason he didn't pursue was because he prioritized tending to his fallen sister. And personally, I empathize with why he didn't try to pursue the tall, slender, fire-breathing man with knife hands, mask, lighting apparatus, and cloak.
All right. So Edward Scissorhands with an attitude shows up, breathes fire in your chick's face. She, of course, I mean, hell, I might faint if that happened. oh, my side, go right down like a bitch. I'm not.
I kind of want to be Spring Hill Jack.
I've been thinking about the physics of this, man. You know the issue I have with it?
Bouncing around on springs and jumping over walls?
No, the amount of force required to launch a 100, say, we'll be modest and say 145-pound man up to a 4th floor balcony would probably break.
You are a flatline cur dog.
Which one? Where?
145 pounds.
I'm talking about an adult, healthy male of the time period.
You mean not you?
Not me, no, man. Hell no.
Oh.
I'm talking about the underfed, orphan street people that lived in London at the time. Or, he might have been
probably 100 pounds.
So, as an elite aristocrat, say a swordsman and a gentleman, as you would expect them to be of the time period, he would have been in fit and healthy, although not superhuman, possibly slightly above average. This individual especially seems to have been quite a bit above average, having the ability to handle flames, electronics, and apparently spring-powered devices about his person. And since they didn't catch him, I assume he didn't break his legs.
Well, I have a slightly different theory. What if it was a teenager?
It would not explain why he could jump to the 4th floor, hop up to a rooftop.
Well, teenagers can do things that grown men cannot do.
I'll agree with that, and I don't have any particular problem with it, except for how do you control a blue flame and beat people with fish as a teenager? I mean,
well, the blue flame is questionable. Could have been blue dust,
or it could
or water.
Could have been a blue flash,
or it could have been a flame.
They took a picture of her. You wouldn't see shit after that.
According to the annual register, the sister who was not stunned said that the man was completely silent during the entire incident, even his footfalls, and even when he spit the blue flames. Lucy should have been burned, but she wasn't. The Lord Mayor had addressed the issue in January of 1838. The attack on Alsop and the Scales sisters took place in February, and in May of that year, the Lord Mayor once again addressed the issue. He asserted that he had been inundated by reports of a similar nature, and he said that many of the witnesses and victims believed that the fiend was in residence, or at least comfortable, near Kensington Palace, as he had personally spoken with one of the witnesses from that place from 1837. Apparently, victims weren't exactly comfortable going to the police about this, and instead preferred anonymous letters. After sorting through the reports, the Lord...
Not Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper is one of the figures that'll be mentioned in this video. We're specifically discussing Spring-Heeled Jack. Uh-oh. He touched his phone. I keep telling him not to do that, but he doesn't listen.
Lord Mayor decided that the culprit was a cloaked man with clothes of white bearskin, who carried with him, quote, metal devices. By mid-1838, Spring-Heeled Jack became topical and therefore worthy of monopolizing upon. A publication called The Penny Dreadful, which was a weekly article that printed frightening fiction stories, began to cover Spring-Heeled Jack as a reoccurring storyline. And because of the nature of The Penny Dreadful, the tale quickly became fictionalized. It seems no one wanted to confess to an encounter that was now officially in the realms of fiction. But it sure seems that the lion's share of reports were not fiction and were not regarded as such, especially before The Penny Dreadful covered Jack. And I think it is worth noting that before The Penny Dreadful covered Jack, he was also called Steel Jack, in reference to the metal apparatus he was never without. But The Penny Dreadful used the name Spring-Heeled Jack, and thus cemented the fiend's moniker. But real interest resumed in Spring-Heeled Jack over 30 years later in 1872. Two girls who were identified as the daughters of the headmaster of Dulwich College and their governess reportedly saw a cloaked man, 8 feet in height, walking quickly across the street from them. The governess later told the News of the World newspaper that the man threw off his cloak, revealing that he was, quote, enveloped in white, with his arms outstretched in front of him. As he crossed the street, the girls screamed, and he leapt away in the nature of his namesake, hopping onto a roof, clearing a height of 9 feet. And I'd like to mention, I'd be very curious to know just exactly what enveloped in white means.
So, one of the issues I have with this, do you remember the gas-powered pogo stick?
Yes.
You know, there was a bunch of people injured by that thing.
Mm-hmm. There's a bunch of people injured by a real pogo stick, too.
True. But the gas-powered pogo stick had one issue with it that would cause it to injure people. And it was because if you stood on it with your feet, on the balls of your feet, it would hyperextend your ankle whenever it fired. If you stood on with the arch of your foot, it would crack your arch when it fired. So it injured almost everyone who attempted to use it in some small way, that they all got put up and are sitting as people's attics today, to this very day. Almost none of them were used for more than a few minutes.
That's crazy.
So how is this?
This is lawn darts.
Lawn darts. That's just good, wholesome fun there, brother.
Yes, sir. I did it. I got the hole to prove it.
I don't want to talk about it. Pretty sure that'll violate the violence policy on YouTube. What you reckon? What's up, Rob? Good to see you. That's New York Outcast.
Sorry about the internet issues, man. I'm trying.
It's fine. I got two shits.
I'm sitting outside now.
You still play lawn darts, dude? They're illegal in every state. You need to hide them things. It's felonious.
Hide them things and invite me and Sasquatch over.
We'll show you some cool games you can play with them. You know, as long as you live.
The News of the World said about the incident, quote, "We can hardly expect to credit that the figure is 8 feet in height and springs over stone walls and lofty hedges."
Okay, but if homie's wearing like some kind of a stilt, I'm not so sure the spring-loaded bit would matter if he was a decent parkour on stilts, right?
Right.
So
my guess is that he could jump really good and people blew it out of proportion.
But the flames in the white suit, though, bro. There's just too many.
I mean, maybe he was Batman.
Maybe it was Batman. I don't know. I'm Iron Man.
Maybe he had a rope.
Right, a circus acrobat on the loose was going out there and doing second story jobs. That actually fits the bill pretty well when you think about it.
Yep.
Especially with the breathing fire and that kind of stuff. All the showmanship that's added to it. They had good meth back then. I don't think that's it, bro. They did have some amazing patent medicines, though. Pretty sure they mixed up fuck it all back in 1909.
Well, my guess is that would have been about the period of time where circuses were a really big thing.
Yeah.
And any circus performer worth their salt could probably do a leap and a bound over a fence pretty easy.
Well, there is one thing, though. Most circus performers, the method of their amazing feats is typically associated with an extreme level of fitness and not wearing a metal suit.
Well, nobody said his suit was metal.
Well, that's true, but he was also called Steel Jack because some people said his suit was metal. And because of his hand.
Maybe he had a metal suit that he used occasionally. Maybe he wasn't wearing it when he leapt over the fence.
I still say we're talking about an early lineman installing electricity that got spooked and ran away.
Could be.
I mean, it would explain the blue fireball. It would explain the weird ejaculations, although they hear what they want to hear, you know. If you've ever seen a lineman in full kit, it's a formidable thing.
Could be. I'm almost 100% positive it's a case of mistaken identity.
A whole bunch of mistaken identities?
Yes, because that happens. It's called mass hysteria.
Oh, I like mass hysteria. I like most kinds of hysteria, especially Def Leppard hysteria.
Yes.
And on hearing a victim, changes from grim blackness to luminous white. Jack was again mentioned 5 years later. In the 1878 edition of the Illustrated Police News, the article said, quote, "A curious story comes from Aldershot. For some time past, the sentries on 2 outlying posts have been frightened by the appearance at night of 2 spectral figures. The figures, glowing with phosphorus, are in the habit of suddenly manifesting themselves, making tremendous springs of 10 or 12 yards at a time, and upsetting the sentry before he had been able to collect himself sufficiently to oppose earthly arms to his ghostly visitants. The latter do him no bodily harm, contenting themselves with upsetting the poor man, after which they mysteriously disappear. So great has been the alarm that it has been found necessary to post double sentries." And according to an article by the same publication a few months later, the sentries did in fact fire on the spectral figures, but to no result. In that incident, the figures were described as dressed in sheepskin. There are several more stories about Spring-Heeled Jack, but I chose to limit my recounts to those that were covered by, as far as I can tell, reputable sources that covered normal news in addition to such oddities. As happens, After the Penny Dreadful popularized the narrative, fact and fiction became entombed in legend, and it's simply impossible to sift through the lore for the true nature of what happened in the rapidly urbanizing and mechanizing streets of Victorian London. However, aside from these particular instances, there was another notorious rash of mysterious humanoid sightings before Spring Heel Jack made an appearance in the media or the street. In 1803, 20 years before the very first incidents of Jack, but in roughly the same place, West London, a series of incidents began that led to widespread discussion of what was known as the Hammersmith Ghost. The Hammersmith Ghost is an intriguing example of an alleged non-human but human-like.
Okay, so this is where we're going to bleed a couple of different myths and legends kind of into the same genre, right?
Yep.
These are merely unidentified sightings that took place in an area in a time period. Call it 1850 to 19, not quite 1950, that'd be too modern. 1850 to 1900. Maybe a little ways into the 1900s.
Yep. I think 1920 was the last reported sighting of Spring Heel Jack.
Makes me want to go to London and do another, just for the funsies. I'd probably get stabbed before I got there.
Probably.
From a lovely English gentleman, I'm sure.
Red mold.
Was a murder.
It was ergot poisoning.
2 women were the first to be haunted by the Hammersmith Ghost.
Maybe.
One pregnant, the other senior, were walking along the cemetery on the grounds of St. Paul's Church. And just to be clear, because this confused me in my research, St. Paul's Hammersmith is different than St. Paul's Cathedral, just so you know. They were assaulted by a, quote, ghost. It grabbed them, pulled them down, ripped and tugged on them, apparently in a prolonged assault. There were no witnesses by the church. It is said that both women and the unborn child died within days of the assault, and it seems that in court, the identity of these women could not be substantiated, but death was a common presence in 1803, and it may make sense that the families of the deceased did not want to involve themselves in a highly publicized trial to come. Either way, the account of the 2 women was largely rumor, but most rumors tend to come from somewhere, and usually that somewhere is nowhere good. The next event took place the same month in 1803. A wagoner, or wagoneer, depending on what you're reading, who was transporting 16 people and 8 horses, was run off the road when a large man, bright white, leapt out in front of the wagon and caused a significant derailment. The scene was allegedly witnessed by many, and though the driver never came forward in the court case to come, a brewer named Thomas Groom would make a claim on the event's veracity. Groom was the first to take the step from legend to law. He testified in court that, while he was walking St. Paul's churchyard one night to cut a more direct route to his residence, he was grabbed by the back of the neck, and a struggle ensued. A struggle that left signs of trauma for the months between encounter and trial. Groom testified that it was his opinion that his assailant was wearing a clean and laundered burial shroud, which was the only feature he could make of the assailant, on account of the bright white. He said his attacker was utterly white and surrounded in white, in a way that suggested that the entity was wearing something other than normal-fitting clothes. Groom and Ghost tuffled on the ground, the specter on his back, forcing his neck into the earth. Groom flung the ghost loose and scrambled to his feet, but the visage was gone. It wasn't Groom's interpretation that the specter had simply vanished into thin air. It was his opinion that the entity was crouched behind one of the many headstones, or brick dividers. Groom didn't stick around to find out which. And though he was the only witness of the alleged Hammersmith Ghost to give testimony in court, it's easy to see why people would be hesitant to come forward about such a strange and unprecedented encounter. Groom was attacked in December of 1803, and a few weeks later, in January of 1804, a man named Thomas Millwood was walking to work. He was a...
Okay, so...
Sounds like that guy was getting raped and didn't want to admit it.
You might not be wrong. I wouldn't necessarily admit it. However, he did go to court about it, so it clearly offended his delicate sensibilities some kind of how.
Did you see the thighs on that fella in the drawing?
I doubt those are based on eyewitness accounts, brother. Just saying.
Somebody jumped out behind that headstone was trying to get them some.
Sounds to me like it was Pennywise the Clown. popped out and
Could
all
have
white,
been.
right? Like terrifying.
Or it could have been somebody with no tan that was naked, like me.
Okay, that's enough of that.
The bricklayer, and his clothes were, quote, of his trade, which were either new or impeccably laundered, being white linen trousers, a white flannel waistcoat, a white apron, and white shoes. Millwood, armed with only his lunch pail, was gunned down by a customs officer named Francis Smith. He had promised the many concerned citizens that he would shoot the ghost, but he shot the bricklayer instead. The shot entered Millwood's mouth and came out the other side. Now this...
You ever seen a bricklayer after work?
Yes, I've been one.
They be frosted kind of white.
Yes.
Can you imagine a drywaller or a plasterer coming home all coated in white?
Yep.
Maybe trying to
Yeah,
get
if you're a plasterer, you're white all the time.
Yeah, it don't matter what color you was born, you're gonna be white.
Yep.
We all float down here.
We all float down here.
Detail omitted in almost all mentions of the Hammersmith Ghost. Francis Smith did not think Millwood was a ghost. Smith thought the ghost was a person in bedsheets harassing people for fun. He shot Millwood thinking that Millwood was a perpetrator disguised as a ghost, not an actual ghost.
We have any missing clansmen around that time period? I mean, maybe he just got misplaced.
Right.
I mean,
maybe he was late to a meeting.
Anybody know where Nathan Forrest was?
Hello. We're supposed to pick our checks up on Friday.
Right? Joe, you got the payroll? God damn it, Joe.
The jury was unwilling to convict Millwood of murder, and to the three judges' chagrin, the jury was unwilling to convict because they were so frightened of the ghost, and the jury believed that they would probably have done the same thing, whether or not the, quote, ghost was a paranormal apparition or a person disguised as a ghost. So to me, this indicates that people were truly hyper-alert for a human-like figure, quote, shrouded in white. The jury found Francis Smith guilty of manslaughter, which carried a much more lenient sentence than murder. The judges were displeased by this and insurrected the jury into coming to a new conclusion. The judges wanted Millwood found either guilty of murder, with the punishment of hanging until dead, or acquitted of all charges. Apparently, the judges reasoned that if Millwood was either an actual ghost or a person pretending to be a ghost, he was still committing no crime by walking down the street, and therefore was not fit to be executed on the spot by Francis Smith. Which is kind of fun because in doing so, the judges set a precedent that you cannot kill a ghost as long as it's not committing any bodily crimes. The jury once more went to chambers. And
wait a second, hold on.
I concur, Doctor.
Let me get this straight now.
Ain't that some shit?
So if the ghost breaks into your house and steals your silver, you got to let him do it. But if he
as long as he doesn't hurt anybody,
you can shoot him. wait a second. It's okay to kill a ghost if he's killing you.
Yes.
Okay.
But only if he's hurting you.
Right. Okay.
He returned with a guilty verdict, and the presiding judge, Lord Chief Baron Archibald MacDonald, sentenced Francis Smith to death. But the illustrious Lord Chief Baron lost a bit of faith in his reasoning after the public outcry at this outcome. So he immediately did what one might expect any given Lord Chief Baron Archibald MacDonald to do. He asked for the Crown's assistance, and detailed his quandary to none other than King George III. George III, who was quite busy tripping on makeup arsenic while awaiting for those pesky colonists to admit.
All right, so the chances are the guy who was covered in white was also tripping on makeup arsenic.
Yeah, I was just about to say that we have cracked the case. Everybody was doing arsenic.
There were arsenic junkies running around the street. I find it hard to believe that what's the green fairy?
Absinthe.
Absinthe. I find it hard to believe absinthe doesn't enter the conversation of this I mean, that was Absinthe Central back then, right?
Yes, and everybody was doing arsenic like cocaine.
Apparently.
That they've made a horrible mistake, invoked an immediate respite during pleasure for Smith, what I know as a stay of execution. And then finally, the good king commuted Smith's sentencing to 1 year's hard labor. And therefore, Sir Lord Chief Baron Archibald MacDonald was off the hook. And it seems that Smith completed a year of hard labor and then left England forever. And a bit ironically, perhaps, it is said that the ghost of Francis Smith now lingers in a Hammersmith pub. And though his fate is unknown, it is a bit ironic that, real or not, he set out to shoot a Hammersmith ghost, which almost killed him, and then allegedly became one himself. But I suppose half the circle...
as long as he doesn't hurt anybody.
But the original Hammersmith...
Apparently, legally speaking, he's safe as a ghost, provided he doesn't accost anyone.
I love the English.
Or was it actually useful? Is it like the lead pigment in paint? Like they use
what's that? Arsenic?
Yeah, no, they
use
titanium dioxide. They'd use lead dioxide or lead.
Well, arsenic started out as a treatment for syphilis, and apparently it has quite the kick, so they kept doing it, and it became a thing.
Freaking nut jobs, man. What's up, old guy Mitch? What's happening, Smoking Auditor? Good to see you, Janica. Welcome in, everybody. Good to see you. Every time you get kicked out, it changes your name back.
Does it?
Ghost was allegedly a man who committed suicide and was then buried on the consecrated church grounds, which at the time, people believed that anyone who committed such a sin cannot be buried among those who died under more sanctimonious terms, which seems like rather harsh judgment on a man who slit his own throat. Anyway, the Hammersmith Ghost was so prolific that the moniker arose 20 years later, in 1824, when a luminous white figure assaulted a woman in London, and then finally came the 1826 report of a springing figure. And apparently that's when people said, if the springing figure is indeed the Hammersmith Ghost, then it's not a ghost. And then comes Spring-Heeled Jack. One thing that I find quite curious about the alleged Hammersmith Ghost, and then soon thereafter, Spring-Heeled Jack, is that there's no argument that someone or something tangible was in fact guilty of these outrages. Even the people who didn't think it was a spectral boogeyman believed it was a criminal of some type. And obviously, they strongly felt that way. So in my opinion, it's clear that something dramatic definitively occurred. Even the highest-ranking members of society, like Lord Chief Baron Archibald MacDonald and Lord Mayor Cowan, in fact, acknowledged that there was legal reason to believe that something was menacing the area. So then I guess it could be asked, what was happening? Some people thought that the Hammersmith Ghost and then Spring-Heeled Jack to come were eccentric or wealthy people who had dedicated time and money to devise some kind of disguise or costume to harass women and scare people. And it seems that the people who felt this was the cause of the specter thought there was probably a group of wealthy aristocrats who had a wager going on.
Here's my theory. Back in 2018, 2019, one of these prank TikTokers got dislocated in time and didn't realize it for a few days. Couldn't upload, couldn't figure out why, eventually killed himself.
Here's my theory. Some enterprising mind come to the realization that if you want to get away with murder, wear a sheet. It's a loophole. Blame it on a ghost.
It was the ghosty did it. Wasn't me. It was the one-armed ghost. Huh. A hot female ghost. We wouldn't report it, but we damn sure brag about it.
That's right.
All right, Mitch. Appreciate it, brother. Swing by any chance you get. You know how it goes. Anyway, man. This does seem like an eclectic bit of activity for a single individual to get up to, and so far it's a 70-year-old ghost story that seems to have rolled into an actual ghost story. Yeah, it's all weird.
Well, it lasted for longer than a human can live, so clearly there was more than one of them.
Yeah, but can't you picture it in your head? A kid comes home, his dad's in jail for some second story burglary job that he did. He's just turned 19 and he's got to take care of his mom. And what does he find in the attic except for the old Spring-Heeled Jack costume?
Yes. Sounds like a good movie.
Right? Actually, I need to talk to Bigfoot Anon. Get that shit rolling.
Who could cause the most uproar, and it seems this theory was prominent because it explained why there were different appearances, one long and cloaked, the other luminous white, or as the anonymous author of the letter said, the disguise of a ghost, bear, or devil. So were aristocrats really so evil as to play such vicious and elaborate pranks?
Absolutely.
Maybe.
Absolutely.
I know it's very trendy to vilify the upper strata of society, sometimes for good reasons, but not always. This is the same spin that's been put on Jack the Ripper, a far more pragmatic terror of the Victorian fog that would come some 50 years after Spring-Heeled Jack. And Jack the Ripper is actually a good example of why I don't really think Spring-Heeled Jack was simply a prankster. If someone is going to put so much time into a seemingly senseless endeavor, one would imagine that such technology would be put to greater utility. And if it were a prank, one would think that someone would come forward eventually to claim credit for it. No doubt, with evidence. If this were some sick game conducted by a privileged few, I think the rules, motives, and rewards would have been more clear. Jack's behavior seems too erratic and aimless to have a clear objective. There was no communication via anonymous letters, no showing off, no origin story or motive. So it seems odd to me that a wealthy person doing this for sport wouldn't have worked harder to make himself more infamous. He could have named and created his brand however he liked, but he never tried. One astute suspect of Spring-Heeled Jack was an Irish nobleman named Henry Beresford, the 3rd Marquis of Waterford. Apparently, in April of 1836, between the 1826 and 1837 confrontations with the Phantom, whose name was still up in the air, the 3rd Marquis of Waterford and the lads had been doing a bit of drinking at the races, and when they arrived to the toll entrance at Melton Mowbray, an attendant asked for the necessary payment before opening the gate and allowing the riders passage. The 3rd Marquis of Waterford and Company saw fit to enter free of charge, and the imposition triggered in them a powerful rage. It seems a row of houses were being painted and repaired at the time. Beresford and the fellas painted the doors, walls, streets, and toll booth attendant red. And linguistically speaking, he was the first to paint the town red. If you
Why I oughta.
Can you imagine waking up the next morning? Honey, get up. What? God, Jeff, what's wrong with my head? Who's shit in my mouth? What did you do last night? I don't know. What did I do last night? Did you paint the entire town red? How? Oh, yeah, no. Boys had a few to drink. We found all the red paint. We decided to put in a good night's work. How's it look? We painted it in the dark. It's got to look great.
Sounds like something we would do.
I wouldn't put in that much damn work on a prank. No way in hell, dude. I'm lazy.
You are now. When we were kids, we'd have done it.
I can't say no to that. Maybe.
Think of the things we did do.
We're not here to discuss that. Some of the statute of limitations still haven't lifted.
If you've
I
ever
understand, but just
he was taken to court, but settled outside of it, and paid for repairs and restitutions. Apparently, the Marquis was legendary for his drunken destruction and general proclivity to maliciousness. And it seems
what
that
is
many
it about Marquis?
Jack, because people were under the impression that the
I don't know.
Marquis de Sade, Marquis to this guy.
What about him?
They're just all weird. Some think Jack the Ripper was a Marquis or a Duke.
I hear you. Smoking auditors like shit. We'll paint the whole town red. Let's do it. Like, you supply the paint, I'll just spray. It'll be good.
Who's bringing the methamphetamines?
All right.
perpetrator must have money to fund his devices and must not fear prosecution should his devices fail him. The Marquis seemed to have turned his life around when he got married in 1842. And as happens sometimes, he died shortly thereafter in a riding accident. Regardless, he was the first to paint the town red, which to me is something of an honor in itself. Personally, I don't think the behavior and description of the entity is satisfactory with the behavior of a mean drunk, so to speak. Mean drunks tend to be far too busy being mean drunks to pull off more sophisticated shenanigans. As far as the wealthy troublemaking aristocrat theory, I don't think it's entirely unreasonable. The thought of someone basically being a Victorian era anti-Batman, well, stranger things have happened, I guess. Maybe some wealthy fellow with far too much time on his hands with a mechanical inclination and a penchant for assault, in fact, made a getup that was meant to disguise, terrorize, and perhaps yield some kind of mobility advantage. However, wealth or no wealth, I think it is safe to say that no such technology as spring boots, glowing mask.
Okay, wait a second. What if his hands, the hands, weren't actually hands or knives or blades, but grappling hooks? If homie could launch the hook, he could get up to any height that he could physically launch that hook up to.
Right. That's what I said. Maybe he had a rope.
And you wouldn't necessarily see that if it was properly concealed under the cloak.
And dark.
Yeah. Darkness does seem to be a common theme. And along with a bright light. And a little bit of a phosphorus, a little bit of chemistry knowledge would take care of that under the right circumstances. I mean, yeah, maybe so.
You may have cracked the case.
I don't think so, because we'd still have to find somebody not only with the capability of doing it, but who maybe had such a device constructed. And that's a little complicated. It might take a little bit more than a couple hours in a shed to pull that one off.
Well, I hate to say this. I hate to be that guy, but I'm pretty sure I could pull it off with the shit I got laying around here.
Well, I was thinking some of that 1,500-pound tape and something like a bait caster spool, one of those big stainless jobs that you use for deep sea fishing. That way you could, like, put a zero drag drop on it, so you could like tink, and then it's flat. So when the drag hits, you could have a little motor, but they didn't have any electricity, so that's where everything kind of breaks down. I guess you could run it yourself with a gear. Or you could just climb the damn thing, but one of them is really, really small.
You're assuming that things played out exactly like you're imagining them, but more than likely, this is eyewitness testimony coupled with sensational media frenzy.
Sure.
Because the reason you know about this is it was written in a newspaper. That means they most certainly embellished.
Absolutely. In fact, the most famous accounts of him are from a Penny Dreadful section of a column. So most of it is fiction. That most of the accounts are fiction to start with. The ones that are actually referenced in here are from the pre-Penny Dreadful series, and so are at least that much more reliable, I suppose.
Maybe he was the first Kingsman.
I like that. Let's roll with it.
Or integrated lamp clothes existed. At the time, that is. So I find this to be a rather unlikely explanation for Jack. But possible, I suppose. I don't think it's the case, but people can be quite strange sometimes. The second theory is that the alleged dreadful entity was nothing more than a cultural phenomenon, a folkloric manifestation of the new threats in a rapidly changing world. Usually I'd be more skeptical of any explanation that contains the phrase cultural manifestation, but in this instance, it's pretty hard to dismiss. I have no doubt that what was literally the dawn of the modern world manifested in people's psychology in unique ways. And after great consideration, I've narrowed down the new threats into 3 categories. First, the implications of an industrialized...
All right, so hypothetically speaking, let's say homie built some gas-powered boots, right? With like a gas jet. Not like the kind that you would like. And I'm not talking Iron Man. I'm talking about just a piston. Just Like the same thing you're sitting on in your office chair. You know what I'm saying? One of these jobs. You hit a button, it launches you, I don't know, 10 feet. It throws 140 pounds, 12 feet into the air. How do you train your legs to deal with that without freaking injuring yourself?
Well, there's another option. Have you ever seen the amputees running on those little hooks that look like backwards feet?
I was thinking about that. That's those spring steel legs. Yeah, dude.
Yes.
All
you would have to do is put your feet in a contraption that's attached to the top of a semicircle, and you get 2 feet onto your height, and you can leap pretty high.
All right.
Society. And the key is consumerism. Because of the factories and efficiency practices that led to mass production, many things that were formerly reserved for the upper class were now available to the lower class, meaning they weren't exactly lower class anymore. And I know this may sound strange from where we're sitting today, but back then, there was concern that your average person wasn't really meant to enjoy the finer things in life. And that's kind of the hallmark of Victorian culture. Things we take for granted now were only recently made accessible to ordinary people. Simple stuff, like wallpaper and elegant clothing produced by textile factories, were no longer merely afforded to royals and nobility. Books were mass-produced.
By the way, that green wallpaper he just showed you, the reason it's green is because of arsenic.
Yes.
And it's dangerous. It wasn't dangerous to work with at the time because it was sealed in by all the glues and stuff. But after that glue dries and it becomes flaky and dissociated with the paper, arsenic just floats off into the air.
Yep. Same thing with lead paint.
Mm-hmm. That's
why people were violent and dumb in the 60s.
That's why the windowsills taste so tasty.
Yes.
Produced. Candles were cheap. Gas lighting was soon to come in the house. Even at night, people could sit and read a book in comfort beside a pretty wall. That was pretty cool. There were affordable carpets that felt good on your feet, so you could take those nice boots off. Hey, that's pretty neat. Washing your clothes didn't take 4 days of hard labor, so you didn't stink. So it seems there was this prevailing notion among the nobility that your average person wasn't really supposed to enjoy such luxuries. And to be fair, I get it. I'm not saying I agree with it, of course, but I get it. If you want to make someone miserable, give them everything they need and take away their goals. Life is supposed to be hard. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And that philosophy makes sense from the ruling class's perspective. If commoners have everything they want and need, what's their incentive to do stuff? I'm not saying I necessarily agree with that sentiment, but I understand the place it comes from. It brings me to the next big unknown of the Victorian Era.
Wait a second.
Basically.
Wait a second. I think this man's a communist.
When did it ever take 4 days of hard labor to wash clothes?
When you were washing clothes for 12 children. You know.
So I used to wash clothes in water with a washboard when I was a kid, and it didn't take 4 days. No. We had a normal family, but I guess if you ran an orphanage, it might take 4 days.
Or if you were Irish Catholic.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's up, Tales Told in the Dark? Welcome in, honey. Good to see you. I think I'm fixing to have the hiccups. It's going to be great.
Fine. Nobody say hello to me. That's fine. I'm just in the background.
They hate your face. Well, I've been on a ban for the past week, so like nobody's seen me. I've only been on other people's channels and stuff. So this is my fun.
I'm just messing with you. I'm just teasing you.
Don't tease me. Why is everybody always picking on me? Because it's so easy.
Industrialization and consumerism led to this weird new thing called the middle class, and the upper class just wasn't sure what to make of it. From their perspective, they thought, do you really...
This is Untethered Live on panel, and that is Tales Told in the Dark Snake.
You want your servant wearing the same suit as you on their day off? Because it's important to remember, the belief that people could govern their own lives was still a relatively new and head-rolling concept. Era. So industry led to consumerism, which led to the middle class, which led to an increasingly godless society. The Church of England was struggling to keep up with the population explosion and expansion of living space. In 1818, the Crown injected £1 million into the church to assist with proliferation into the new growing townships. Then in 1824, after a contested parliament debate, the Crown injected another £5 million into the church. And it seems the money was not squandered, as around 3,000 churches were built between the stimulus and 1875, and people seemed to enjoy the, quote, new Victorian style of building for obvious reasons. So since the church's expansion loosely coincided with the Spring-Heeled Jack events, people have claimed that Jack was merely a personification of the need for churches and propaganda about life without them. And in my opinion, the decline of the role of God in society had a lot to do with the decline of death itself. I've heard it said, there are no atheists in foxholes. But let me explain. In the 1850s, life expectancy for men was about 41 for women. Compare that with the late medieval period, where life expectancy was about 30 for men and 32 for women. And to be clear, life expectancy data is extremely misleading because infant mortality throws everything off. But regarding the late medieval period, almost half of all people born would not make it to their 10th birthday. Then if you made it to 10, you had a good chance of making it to 25. And if you made it to 25, you had a good chance of making it to 50 or even 70. So the average age of 30 is skewed because the death of so many infants offset the long-lived. I've even heard it said that birthdays weren't celebrated until a child turned 10, because otherwise it was best not to get attached. So ironically, the average life expectancy was 30, yet that was the least common age to die. And even though things still weren't great in the Victorian era, longevity still dramatically increased. In the 19th century, this remarkable thing began to happen where everyone you knew and loved didn't randomly die all the time. And personally, I think that's a large factor as to why there was something of a step away from religion. In the 1500s, statistically speaking, you're the third baby born of an 18-year-old mother, and you ripped out her cervix on arrival, so your mom's dead. You have 2 older brothers, and there's a 46% chance they won't make it to their 10th birthdays, so one of them dies before you turn 5. And if you make it to 10, which is only slightly likely, then it's time for your remaining brother to join the army. So he's dead, probably. Either way, he's gone. But maybe you defy the odds and manage to live old enough to have 3 kids of your own. At least one of them dies, maybe 2, and maybe kills you in the process. And maybe the remaining kid will live to 10, but you won't know it because you died of plague after your hand.
Is anybody else getting black-pilled suddenly? Because, wow. That's pretty harsh.
Yeah.
Hands fell off. All the while,
that's how
with that mask.
Check that thing out.
That's how life was back then.
It was rough shit, man. Shit was hardcore. Yeah. What happened earlier today. I was going to be watching movies all day, and I got to the end of a series. I was watching Arcticus Blood and Sand. And we got to the end of the 2nd season, and I was like, I don't want to watch this anymore. And Tubi suggested the Free State of Jackson. Is that right? Jones, the Free State of Jones.
Yeah.
So I turned it on because it's a good movie, except you forget how hardcore that damn thing is all the way through. Like, there is no moment where you're not sitting there going, wow, Jesus, these people, it's just horrible. All of it. But it's a good movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
If that was typical life for us, I think we'd all probably take God a little more seriously, regardless of how seriously we take the notion now.
If we had more people walking around with that outfit on, we'd take God more seriously. That thing's scary.
It's terrifying. It looks like a spy versus spy outfit.
Excessive mortality, and sometimes new fears are required to take the place of the old ones. I think that Victorian London was actually in a similar position as we are now. For them, it was manufacture. For us, it's the technology sector. They had no idea what everyone having everything would lead to, just as we have no idea what everyone being connected will lead to. Sometimes I smile and think about what an honor it is to be a guinea pig on this sacred and desolate rock. this rolling stone. Change is scary, and one can argue that spring-heeled Jack was a way of coping with the fears of this changing world, because that's really all fear is, the unknown. Like I said, normally I'd be more skeptical of any argument that includes the phrase cultural manifestation, but in this case, it's pretty hard to ignore. I have no doubt that what was literally the rise of the modern world came with some hiccups. Take, for example, the gas lampposts of Kensington Palace. One visitor wrote, quote, "The streets are lit all winter, and even during the full moon." Other people complained about gaslighting. They basically said, it's night, it's supposed to be dark, and that's how it used to be, not altogether so long ago. Imagine basing your nocturnal activity on the vibrancy of the moon. So thus far, as for the theories of Jack, we have a wealthy aristocrat up to no good, a cultural manifestation attributed to otherwise unremarkable, if not amoral events, and there's another option. This is one I think we must be wary of, and it can be called a lot of things, but I'm going to call it after-the-fact reasoning. That is, interpreting the events based off hindsight, based off our modern notion. I watched a video about Jack from a popular channel regarding the anonymous letter that was sent to the Lord Mayor. The video said that Lord Mayor Cowan, quote, believed the author to be a woman who had become senseless as a result of the strange attacker, and mockingly implored her to write a description of the demon that would enable him to catch him. Now that the mysterious Jack had been discussed by the mayor, a male authority figure of the upper class, the real attention began. And you know, that's reasonable to an extent. I'm not knocking it in itself. There was obviously terrible inequity back then. And even more so, there was, of course, a misogynistic, to say the least, bend to Jack's behavior. The problem is that the text doesn't really indicate that the Lord Mayor was mocking the matter at all. Here's the best example of a newspaper segment about the Lord Mayor reading the letter. The Lord Mayor, on reading the account, observed that as our friends on the other side of the Atlantic were in the habit of saying, it was extraordinary if true. In his opinion, it was not calculated for the meridian of London, but if any trick had been practiced by fools, he had no doubt that the vigilance of the police might be depended upon to prevent annoyance. It appeared to him that the letter, which was written in a very beautiful hand, was the production of a lady who might have been terrified by some bugaboo into this mode of obtaining retribution at the hands of the Lord Mayor. But as the terrible vision had not entered the city, he could not take cognizance of its iniquities. A gentleman stated to his lordship that the servant girls about Kensington and Hammersmith and Ealing told dreadful stories of the ghost or devil, who on one occasion was said to have beaten a blacksmith and torn his flesh with iron claws, and in others, to tear the clothes from the backs of females. As one of the injured people had been known to tell the story, perhaps they did not live to tell it, the Lord Mayor believed that one of the 7 ladies who had lost their 7 senses was his correspondent. He hoped she would do him the favor of a call, and he would have the opportunity of getting from her such a description of the demon as would enable him to catch him, in spite of the paid press and police. And this was their interpretation. I don't know. It didn't seem like he was mocking. I scoured the internet, and aside from sources saying that he made a joke of it, I could find no reason to believe that was actually the case. And based off numerous newspaper reports at the time, we know that nightly police patrols were in fact increased, and we know that Cowan said that he'd heard independent reports of such happenings. Cowan made the obvious assumption of who would be motivated enough to write such a letter to the victim, further reasoned by the elegant penmanship. He even offered the victim to bypass press and police and to come to him directly. And again, I don't know, but that seems like what a decent leader would do. Regardless of what you hear and why, this incident actually seems to have been taken quite seriously. The only reason I bring all this up is to impress on you the impact of after-the-fact reasoning. That video I mentioned has a theory, and they're working to confirm it, but I have no doubt they had that theory long before they actually looked at the accounts. Again, I don't know. I just read the entire newspaper article, and it doesn't sound mocking to me. Maybe I'm missing something. I often am. So these are the 3, what I would call standard or acceptable explanations for the Jack phenomenon. And as always, they're not mutually exclusive. And frankly, it's reasonably compelling. Wealthy.
Are we talking wealthy aristocrat? Yeah. The Abraham DeLacy. Casey, I don't know. An aristocrat with some special talent and skills. Just people seeing what they want to see as a cultural manifestation, or retroactively themselves having seen something they don't understand.
I would say it would be more likely a construction worker or somebody that was a little bit more nimble than an aristocrat who has never worked a day in their life and probably don't have the strength to pull themselves over a wall.
I mean, a lot of aristocrats back then were soldierly types, so they may have been in exceptional condition. I mean, some of them, you know. Hey, Barnaby, good to see you.
Incidentally, you know that mask we were talking about a minute ago?
Mm-hmm.
Buddy said that the mask was suspicious. Do you know why it was so pointy like that?
Enlighten me.
The plague doctor would put posies in the mask and wear it on his face.
Correct.
Now, that's where the ring around the rosie's pocket full of posies rhyme comes from, is the Black Plague.
Right.
They used to think that posies, the smell of posies, would push away the plague. They didn't understand germ theory back then.
Right. All right. Now he's going to get into the weirder parts of the concept. So, somebody from the future.
Nope.
The person's elaborate method of assault, disguised as a prank, perhaps one or two incidents involving strange costumes, manifested into a legend based off a culture in flux that we have since attributed meaning to, and therefore attention. You may have noticed this. On my channel, I like to give the extraordinary the benefit of the doubt. I do this because I suspect that there just may be more to life than barn owls, swamp gas, and costumes. But in this case, I hesitate. The legend of Spring-Heeled Jack and the Hammersmith Ghost may very well be just that. Legends. Perhaps the mundane, blown out of proportion, and then made fantastic over the many cruel years since. So I'm not really discounting any of them, because honestly, I'm not sure what to make of all of this myself. But there is one factor that I kind of unexpectedly stumbled upon, a factor that I find rather curious. I've been working with an illustrator for some time now, and I had an unanticipated struggle with completing this video. I couldn't figure out what Jack was supposed to look like. I looked at all the older illustrations, and I looked at all the modern interpretations. And simply put, none of them align with the actual report. We know he wore a cape for the purpose of concealing his strange attire while in transit. We know he wore what was either a helmet or a headpiece. We know he had what were described as iron gloves or metal claws. We know that his garb was on multiple occasions described as pristine white, to the point that it, quote, glowed luminous white. And if not glowing directly, witnesses said that he at least wore white oilskin, or, quote, the white skins of a bear. He had a lamp-like device on his body that one witness interpreted as being activated by a candle. He had a mask that shot blue flames and had no burning effect, eyes that glowed the color of fire, and though no one ever reported any type of actual springs on his boots, they believed that his footwear must have possessed some type of technological quality to them. I've learned a lot about describing features represented in art. It's very tricky, because when I took the time to technically look at the observation from the actual account, I came up with something that looked a lot more like this from the period illustrations. The more I read through the description, the less I could come up with anything from within the realm of the Victorian era, even in the form of disguise or.
As an observation, Splinter of the Mind's Eye, the first sequel to Star Wars, which was written as Blue Harvest.
Yes.
Vader appears very much in the description of Spring Hill Jack. He wears a black cloak, white suit, black helmet. He's a very different character from the classic Vader that you're familiar with. The dude from Spaceballs.
The descriptions were so foreign, so out of place, that the depictions of the time couldn't really capture its essence. And I find that curious. How can something be reported and be described? Think about how hard it would be to explain seeing something like this to someone who lived in the 1830s. You couldn't say spacesuit, couldn't say control panel. The term respirator was brand new at the time. I imagine blue light may very well have been described as blue flame. The entity could move in impossible ways. We must have had spring boots, even though there was not a single mention of springs in any report. It does seem a bit strange that Jack names it springs, were not once reported. If any one of these accounts are true, about Jack was very wrong, very impossible, and they could only explain it by the technology of the day. It really truly seems like people were describing features for which there was not a concept for, and I find that fascinating, because if you think about Jack's description, actually in conjunction with his behavior, he doesn't really fit into any of the explanations at all. And this is the central theme of what I find so interesting about Spring-Heeled Jack. He doesn't really fit into any of the preordained categories. He wasn't seeking the fame and notoriety that one would think would be the desired goal of an aristocrat's prank. The perpetrator sent no anonymous letter to Jack the Ripper or the Zodiac or any number of attention-seeking fiends. I can't really make out any intrinsic correlation between the description and consumerism or class struggle. As to the lack of churches, his description certainly is demonic, as represented then or now. I realize the notion of the stereotypical diabolical ambiance obviously shifts over time, but sprinting through the streets with some kind of helmet, device on the abdomen, and metal appendages enveloped in white light with the ability to make his eyes and shoot some kind of blue flame.
Hello, Manic Mouth. How you doing? Good to see you. Welcome in.
I got it.
You
He's
get
Skeletor.
Skeletor? You'll never get me now, He-Man. Maybe. He's definitely a Cylon. I agree with Bernie. Everyone's a Cylon. We're going to have to do a Battlestar Galactica breakdown because I want to explain how it is that there are no actual humans left. That the Cylons are making perfect copies of humans and sending them out so that they can have something to hunt.
Wow.
Cycle. They tell
Good.
you
You're a manic depressive.
No. They tell you in the very first episode that they're explaining where all the different people come from. And everything. In this cycle, this Battlestar Galactica, this thing happens. And it goes on and shows you that one. In the most recent version of Battlestar Galactica, they also open with a reference to this cycle. And in this cycle, it's very different from the previous cycle, but it's still very much the same.
Interesting.
As you said, AI wouldn't be able to progress technology. And Battlestar Galactica has been analog technology for the past 5,000 years. Oh no, that's its own show.
Flame from its headpiece. It seems a bit out of left field for a demon. This is how demons were depicted. Grotesque and abominable. Jack was described as gentlemanly at a glance. This was long before devils became men. I'm sure Jack was horrified. Don't get me wrong. I would love to not have encountered him. His appearance doesn't even remotely touch on the quintessential demonic tropes or the archetypal elements of the diabolical, fiendish, or otherwise infernal entities at the time. Jack never had a description of facial hair, skin tone, or eye color. Perhaps none of that was visible. And as far as Jack being written off as a social critic, obviously something happened, regardless of whatever.
Maybe it's Shredder.
Years later.
I like that.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Heroes in a half shell. Turtle power.
What if the turtles were actually white guys? That changes the whole meaning of turtle power.
If you got hate in your heart, let it out. Turtle power.
Something caused a decent amount of interest. Something happened to make numerous people empowered, matter quite seriously. Something happened to put people on edge. And it was probably something strange. So none of this strikes me as a theological demon, nor do I find it particularly aligned with any notion of undesired intimacy or gender and class-based imbalance. And it can be argued that Jack's description is beyond any aristocrat's technological prowess at the time. I mean, blue flame that doesn't burn, eyes that glow like fire, and iron gloves, all enveloped in white. It's strange, but this strikes me as something out of science fiction, which, as we know it today, didn't really begin until around the 20th century. And anything like Jack, in literature or film, didn't come out until really the 1950s. To me,
Not true.
about Jack. He's from a genre out of time.
Jules Verne.
Not true. The first science fiction was the Bhagavad Gita from India.
That shit reads like Buck Rogers. The Mahabharata is just like Buck Rogers.
Yep. So India had the first science fiction.
I'll go that route.
Unless it was not fiction.
Right. You gotta draw a line somewhere, and I'll let y'all make that decision.
It's curious to me that something out of science fiction was reported before science fiction. If the concept existed, surely the artist captured it more clearly. It seems like it's in the wrong order. You'd think there'd be fictionalized accounts of such technological entities and then sightings. It would be the other way around in Jack's. The more I tried to visualize it became so abundantly evident that the illustrations and predictions are just flat out wrong. This is not what was described. I don't blame the 1830s illustrators at all. There literally were not yet words to describe what people were seeing. Luminous light, integrated devices in the clothes and boots, eyes the color of fire, and a headpiece that emits blue flame. The artists literally couldn't fathom what they were supposed to do, so they came up with the closest likeness that could possibly account for the descriptions. But to me, it seems like they missed it. Who can blame them? Because none of that is what's so crazy to me. It didn't exist in fact or fiction. If there were things. Imagine trying to explain a smartwatch to an 1830s illustrator. It's like a watch. It glows and moves around. It does stuff. The illustrator's editor will say, yeah, why don't you just give them... Yep.
Right. So how do we explain a smartwatch to somebody from Rome?
It's like a watch, only it's smart.
No clue.
They had pocket watches.
Not in Rome. Not ancient Rome.
Oh, is that what he said? I thought we were still talking about the 1800s.
No, that's my question. How would you...
You know, in Samaria, in ancient Samaria, on the wall, that guy with the beard, he's got his hand stuck out and he's got a pine cone in his hand. Look at his wrist. You know that thing that's on his wrist is like that.
Always wondered if that was maybe a sundial.
I think it was.
Because I mean,
it's either a sundial or a lotus flower.
Well, I mean, all you need to know is which way was north and stand in the right spot. I don't know. What do you think?
More than likely, it was just decorative, like a bracelet.
But all of them wore it?
Maybe it was their calling card. Look, we're from Samaria.
But it wasn't just Sumerians. You find them on English. I mean, Egyptian.
I don't know. Maybe it was a sundial.
Mayans also wear those weird little wristbands. Oh, it's real creepy, though. I don't know.
With fire beneath the slit. It was a heavy, red like fire, not a metal breastplate, but some kind of lamp-like device. The illustrators did their best, but there wasn't words for this stuff. According to the eyewitness account, this is something out of Star Wars, not the Old Testament or the New. But after the Penny Dreadful brought Jack on as a reoccurring storyline, it's easy to see how legend and law, fact and fiction conflate. They say life imitates art. One reoccurring theme from before the Penny Dreadful is that Jack went totally black.
The quote you're trying to say is that sufficient advanced sign is less than the uninitiated. That was Clark, 76.
To being lit up, in quote, enveloping. The description often accompanied a lamp-like device. And this is critical to realize about Jack. There was no applied electricity as we know of it today, years before Edison's light bulb, and even later came the electric torch. Enveloped by white, or luminous white, sounds an awful lot like lit or turned on. These people wouldn't have had a way to describe that. And so obviously, illustrators would have had no idea how to interpret it. There were often 3 different, quote, disguises. What if there were 3 different modes? Remember, fire was the only way they would have interpreted light, or lightning for that matter. The 1878 article from the Police News is such a good example of what I mean when I say that what was reported is not what represents. If we were to give the report any merit, this is not what it looked like. And again, I don't blame the illustrators, who no doubt never even spoke to witnesses. It sure seems like numerous people describe something they look at the language to relay. Because if you read the reports, I read some of them, it's not what people like to see. That's why I almost like the wealthy aristocrat theory. Only the aristocrat can become the place, perhaps the time. I mean, if you had technology 10,000 years beyond the you could access that era, taking it out on a test drive would be rather appealing. So, of course, the whole assault part. And would Jack really have to be 10,000 years more advanced? Look how far we've come, only 200 years since these incidents occurred. At the end of the day, Spring-Heeled Jack was either a few isolated, very peculiar sightings and assaults, in hindsight, have interpreted some greater meaning behind, or it was something else entirely. But in order for that to be the case, the perpetrator would have to be out of time. I don't know, if people exist somewhere or something that are on a different technological level than even we are today, do you think they may have some business with Victorian Era London, particularly around Kensington Palace? I guess, yeah. We'll never know what happened there, but it's at least interesting to consider that the report seemed to be dancing around something there was as if he had. And I also find it interesting that what in fact may be the very first science fiction character is not in fact considered to be fiction. Anyway, this video turned out to be a bit of an appeal for me.
All right.
Well,
So
all righty then.
Spring-Heeled Jack.
I think we've come to the conclusion that it's most definitely Darth Vader, Shredder, Boba Fett, construction worker, aristocratic turtle.
What if it was actually Darth Vader, Shredder, aristocratic turtle construction worker from the future?
From the future?
Right.
That had to be it.
We cracked it. We solved it. There you go.
We did it.
Now what, fearless leader?
I got to go to work in the morning, so I'm going to go to bed.
All right, brother.
I had a good time. Thank you for having me over. Everybody in chat, hello. Good to see you. Come see me on Untethered Live on Rumble and on YouTube.
Y'all should at least check it out if nothing. Don't let the man get you down.
I love you, man. I'm sorry. I'm sorry about the internet connection thing. I've caught like every other word. I've been trying to hang on.
I dig it. Your echo cancellation is trash.
Yes, I know. Everything's trash tonight.
Okay. I forgive you.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night. I love you.
Peace out.
Oh shit!
So
what
are you doing? Are you going to beat up the mic with us?
Is it beating up the mic right now?
Not yet.
No, because I'm telling you, it's those headphones in particular. They're super sensitive, and like every time I move, that's what's happening. But see, right now, like the thing is swinging like a monkey in a tree, and it ain't beating it up.
I guess
I don't like. Can we come up with another term besides beating it up?
But you beat it down like a redheaded stepchild, though. You beat it up in the bathroom.
I'm really not though. I'm usually just like move. Well, I mean, if I'm moving it, it's just swinging. I'm not. You know what I mean? I'm not beating it up first.
It up while it's swinging.
That's not what she said about it swinging. Mine is always swinging. Because, you know, in my head, mine's like, I got a wiener the size of like King Kong's. So, okay, I thought, this is my personal opinion. The other day when I was watching, and it was just yesterday, I was watching a video about Spring Hill Jack. I got the impression that he was like, everything that he did sounded real similar to Jack the Ripper stuff. Like, so I don't know if that was just me half-ass listening or what.
The only things that I can see in association with Jack the Ripper, first of all, Spring Hill Jack operated across the Lower East End of London, not just Whitechapel.
Okay. Okay.
Jack the Ripper's
fair enough.
Guaranteed killings were all in Whitechapel.
Right.
There may be others that weren't attributed to him, but the Spring Hill Jack thing crossed 70 years and like freaking all parts of London, mostly the upper crust areas where he would accost women with fish and bright flashes of light. And
he would beat them with fish.
At least one account of
was accosted.
Involves apparently a gentlemanly figure approached a servant's entrance to someone's home after ringing the bell quite calamitously. Got a response from one of the servant ladies who came to the door and opened it, only to be accosted by a gentleman who was 7 foot tall, breathed blue fire, had red eyes, and hit her with a halibut.
Damn, okay.
Hold on. Not done yet. Leaving the halibut with her upon her breast, he turns, vaults 2 steps, and leaps over a 9-foot wall, having not touched the wall, merely vaulting it.
And it was in London?
That's the report she gave, not only to the owner of the house, but to the cops when they showed up to take the report.
What if it was a kangaroo? I was just sitting there thinking, I was like, man, what if it was a kangaroo? He whopped her with a fish.
Wait. Okay. Let's remove the breathing fire for a minute, okay? Let's just assume that was just her not being able to comprehend what she was looking at.
What was happening?
And she saw an actual 7-foot long sewer rat hopping down the road and freaked completely out.
That would make sense, would it not? I mean, come on, think about it. No. If a fucking I can't even repeat it. But instantly, for some reason, when you were retelling that story, I was like, damn, what if it was a fucking kangaroo? Because, you know that woman whose dingo got her baby and nobody believed her for years. And turns out the dingo ate her baby. Right. So what if that was a kangaroo? I'm just saying.
This brings in the question, are we talking a red roo or one of them beefy browns? It doesn't matter. That's immaterialism.
It doesn't matter. But have you seen one of them things fight? Have you seen them things when they're fighting?
No, but I have seen a couple in zoos and whatnot, and they are big, beefy specimens. They look tasty as hell. I would eat that thing with some fava beans and a nice chilled fresco.
I'm so disturbed now. Anyway. I'm so deeply disturbed by this whole conversation. I was not prepared. I really though. It's like some CIA just planted that thought into my head. Like it's a kangaroo, Emma. It's a kangaroo.
Let's go with the kangaroo.
It's kangaroo.
So a local high class baker adopted a kangaroo while he was visiting Australia. He brought it home. The kangaroo
got out,
thinking it was a wombat. But it grew to a full-size kangaroo in his bakery, eating nothing but like donuts and
donuts and shit, cake and yeah.
So he's chunky. He's not. I don't see that vaulting a 9-foot fence.
Wait. I mean, if it was a 7-foot kangaroo, you don't think it couldn't easily clear a 9-foot fence? You don't think so? If it was at a dead run and guys hop on, you don't think so?
Maybe if he was all jacked up on powdered sugar.
My God.
Maybe it was a crack room.
Yeah, it might have got. I mean, you never know. It may have been that crazy ass meth Molly that's going around down there these days. You never know. You never know. The meth Molly, whatever. That was a weird conversation this morning too. What was that?
Huh?
What was that?
What? Where? When?
That sound.
Huh?
Yeah, what's that? What is that?
That might be Squatch.
Oh, that's what Wasquatches sound like? Is that a mating? Is that a mating call?
It can be.
I was like, this is interesting.
Right.
It's been a day. It's been a day.
All right. I'm fixing to wrap this whole thing up and we're going to take it out with a bang.
All right. Yeah. Let's do
Yeah.
it.
3, 2, 1.